High. The biblical God Yahweh didn't come by what he has today by hard work and perseverance. Well, actually, I guess he did work hard, and he certainly persevered, so maybe I should say he didn't come by it honestly. Yahweh did rightfully own a small portion of land and a group of people. He received his share of the world from his father, Elyon. We read about this passing on of people and land by Elyon in Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9. Yahweh was given Jacob when Elyon set the boundaries for the nations. Yahweh was Elyon's son and thus was able to inherit. Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9. This is from the New Jerusalem Bible, 1985. When the Most High, Elyon, gave the nations each their heritage, when he partitioned out the human race, he assigned the boundaries of nations according to the number of the children of God. But Yahweh's portion was his people. Jacob was to be the measure of his inheritance. Now, I know the King James Version and some others say this division of the nations was according to the number of the sons of Israel. But the English Standard Version also translates this allotment of nations as being a division according to the sons of God. And it states that Yahweh received Jacob as his allotted heritage. Both the Revised Standard Version and the New Revised Standard Version agree. The RSV says Elyon fixed the bounds of the people according to the number of the sons of God, and the NRSV states that he fixed the boundaries according to the number of the gods. The New Living Translation says the division was according to the number in his heavenly court. Many of the Septuagint manuscripts say angels of God, and some say sons of God. A Dead Sea Scrolls fragment also says sons of God. Think about it logically. Nothing else makes sense. Do followers of Yahweh think Yahweh inherited Israel for himself, from himself, and divided up the rest of the world according to the number of the sons of Israel? Did Reuben rule over Egypt? Judah rule over Amalek? Levi rule over Moab, etc.? The only way this is reasonable is that the high God divided up the world and his son Yahweh received Israel as his portion. And that's what the text says. Besides, would the God of the Bible wait till Jacob had sons to divide up the nations among them? Well, only if you view the Bible as the story of Israel, then maybe you could see it that way. If what came before meant nothing and nobody but Israel means anything, then sure. The Bible does say Yahweh is the God of Israel. But that would pose a lot of other problems for Christians and doesn't explain the meaning of the whole passage anyway. Bob Seidensticker noted regarding this passage, here we see Elyon, the head of the divine pantheon, dividing humankind among his children, giving each his inheritance. The idea of a divine pantheon with a chief deity, his consort, and their children, the council of the gods, was widespread through the ancient Near East. Elyon, short for El Elyon, is the chief god not just in Jewish writings, but in Canaanite literature. The passage concludes with Yahweh getting Israel as his inheritance. We learn more about terms like sons of the gods by widening our focus to consider Ugaritic Canaanite texts. Ugarit was a Canaanite city, destroyed along with much of the ancient Near East during the Bronze Age collapse in roughly 1200 BCE, a period of widespread chaos from which Israelite civilization seems to have grown. The Ugaritic texts state that El and his consort Asherah had 70 sons, which may be the origin of the 70 nations, or 72, that came from Noah's descendants listed in Genesis 10. That's the end of the quote. So again, as this is important, El Elyon, the Most High God, divided the nations, and Yahweh received Israel as his inheritance. The land of Israel and the people of Israel were Yahweh's portion or share. Yahweh received a part, a territory, a tract of land. Yahweh was not given the whole world to rule. He ruled only over the Israelites. Hence, he is, as the Bible says, the God of Israel. What did Moses say when he went down to Egypt to call out the people of Israel? Exodus 5:1, and afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. This is said, You, Pharaoh, and all your people, you are not my people. My people are Israel. Egypt had their own gods. The Egyptians didn't belong to Yahweh. Yahweh wasn't calling everybody in Egypt. He wanted only the Israelites, over whom he had authority. Yahweh went into another God's land and rescued his people out of it. Let's talk about another God mentioned in the Bible. I think that should help clarify what I'm saying here. Just as Yahweh was the God of Israel, Shemesh was the god of Moab. The Bible tells us this. Numbers 21:29. Woe to thee, Moab, thou art undone, O people of Shemesh. He hath given his sons that escaped, and his daughters into captivity unto Sihon, king of the Amorites. Judges 11:24. Wilt not thou possess that which Shemesh thy God giveth thee to possess? So whomsoever the Lord our God shall drive out from before us, them will we possess. Jeremiah 48:7. For because thou hast trusted in thy works and in thy treasures, thou shalt also be taken, and Shemesh shall go forth into captivity with his priests and his princes together. Jeremiah 48:13. And Moab shall be ashamed of Shemesh, as the house of Israel was ashamed of Bethel, their confidence. Jeremiah 48:46. Woe be unto thee, O Moab! The people of Shemesh perisheth, for thy sons are taken captives and thy daughters captives. Shemesh apparently didn't always protect his people, as Yahweh sometimes did. Maybe the Moabites were whoring after Yahweh, and Shemesh is a jealous god like Yahweh, who knows? Shemesh obviously inherited the land and people of Moab from the Most High God Elyon, just as Yahweh inherited the land of Israel. Back in those days, gods were connected to land. Psalm 137:4 states, How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Well, to us, that makes no sense at all. After all, God is everywhere. But Israel is supposed to be the Holy Land. If you're not in the land of Israel, you're not with the God of the Bible. Right? At least at that time, this was the thinking. If they were exiled to a strange land, they had been rejected by their God. And I've got this in a weird color, and I can barely see it. As we saw, this applied not just to Yahweh and his people, but to Shemesh and his people. Shemesh went into captivity along with his people. Defeat in battles and exile into other land meant that these people's God had forsaken them. Otherwise, why would they have been defeated? By their enemies. Their God wasn't with them. That's the only answer they knew. Well, I mean, their God might not have been able to defeat iron chariots too, so there's that. But other than that, again, Yahweh received Israel, and Shemesh got Moab as their inheritance from the Most High God. I hope nobody's going to cry accommodative language here with regard to Shemesh. It's the same language used for Yahweh and his people. But I can hear it now. Shemesh didn't really do anything for the Moabites, and Shemesh didn't really go into captivity. It was actually Yahweh giving these good gifts to the Moabites despite their evil ways, because all good gifts come from him. Shemesh wasn't real. The writers just used accommodative language. We've all heard it. Well, if this doesn't mean what it says, that the Most High God, Elyon, divided up his land with his sons, then the only answer is that Yahweh gave Shemesh the land of Moab. Thus Yahweh believed in other gods, and other gods had people under them just as Yahweh did. Remember, the people of Egypt weren't Yahweh's either. Or perhaps Yahweh pretended with the people of Moab that there was a god named Shemesh who ruled them. These people definitely believed Shemesh was a god, in the same way Yahweh was. And so did the Israelites. You might believe in Shemesh, but you might not believe in Shemesh, but Yahweh did. We simply cannot dismiss everything that goes against our belief system by crying accommodative language. And we especially can't do it in this passage regarding Israel's being Yahweh's inheritance. If indeed Yahweh received Israel from the Most High God when he divided up the nations among the lesser gods, yes, if there's a Most High God, then there are lesser gods, then other lesser gods also received an inheritance of land and people. We can't say, yes, Yahweh was given Israel, that part's true, but the other nations don't really have gods. That's just accommodative. Note also that Yahweh inherited. He was given some. Who gave it to him? What does your book say? Elyon, the Most High God, gave it to him. Yahweh received Israel or Jacob as his portion or share of Elyon's property. Let me repeat that. Yahweh inherited. You understand what that word means, right? You know what's inherent in inherit. It means a person receives something in a will or by succession in some other way. We can dismiss anything in the Bible that we want to, of course, but we can't say the same language is literal when referring to Yahweh, but accommodative when referring to Shemesh because, we just need it to be that way. That's special pleading for Yahweh. We can choose to call it all accommodative, say the book is filled with poetry and allegories and metaphors and stories, not intended to be taken as fact, but to be understood as simply a means to express ideas, and I'll happily accept that. If Christians are willing to let talk of their God also be accommodative, we'll be in agreement. Now, some more liberal Christians do view Yahweh's nemesis, Satan, in an accommodative manner. They don't believe he's real and have good reasons for thinking this. If only they would realize the same is true of Yahweh. Being the son of Elyon, Yahweh was a Canaanite god. As I said in the biblical text, he later stole Elyon's position to ascend to the title of the Most High God. By doing so, he robbed his siblings of their inheritance. They no longer had a people or land, as Yahweh took it all from them. The fact that Yahweh in the Bible was later confused with Elyon is shown in names like Israel, Bethel, Eli, Eliezer, Elkanah, Elizabeth, Elijah, Elisha, Elihu, Elisheba, and on and on and on. It's not Israel or Israel, after all. When Yahweh became Elyon, he also married Elyon's wife, or his own mother. This was Asherah. According to Zev Herzog, Hebrew inscriptions have been found that mention Jehovah and his Asherah, Jehovah Shamron and his Asherah, Jehovah Teman and his Asherah. The authors were familiar with the pair of gods, Jehovah and his consort Asherah, and send blessings in the couple's name. These inscriptions from the 8th century BCE raise the possibility that monotheism as a state religion is actually an innovation of the period of the kingdom of Judea, following the destruction of the kingdom of Israel. Another interesting point about Yahweh. Remember that Moses went to Midian when he fled from Egypt? And he married a Midianite woman who was the daughter of a priest in Midian. The Midianites were descendants of Abraham through his wife Keturah. They worshipped various gods, one of whom was Yahweh. Both the Edomites and Midianites worshipped Yahweh before the Yahweh cult reached Israel. When Yahweh approached Moses, he told Moses that his name was Yahweh, but that he had never told the Israelites that before. Then I suppose Moses convinced the Israelites that Elyon's demigod son, Yahweh, was their own Most High God. Elyon. That would be easy to do when gods went by various names, as they tended to do. Or maybe at the time, they realized Yahweh was just one of the gods, and he was theirs, and he inherited them. But, later, he became more important and became the only one. Yahweh, that is, those who wrote about Yahweh, believed in many gods. Yahweh's followers simply thought it best to worship only Yahweh. They belonged to him. Well, they didn't always just worship him. I'm sure we all remember this verse, Jeremiah 44:17. But we will certainly do whatsoever thing goeth forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings to her, as we have done we and our fathers, our kings, and our princes in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then we had plenty of victuals, and were well and saw no evil. Yeah, the Queen of Heaven was a lot better to the Hebrews than Yahweh was. I'd have kept worshiping her too, and maybe got rid of old Yahweh altogether. All of the gods we ever heard tell of are figments of men's imagination. Elyon, Shemesh, Asherah, Zeus, Yahweh, all of them. If there is a God, it obviously doesn't want to introduce itself to us, and I'm okay with that. Yes, we have ancient tales about the gods battling with one another, stealing land from one another, and doing all sorts of crazy things. And in the Bible, Yahweh, the God of Israel, comes out on top and takes all the spoils. He wins the golden ticket, or Game of Thrones, Survivor, the Hunger Games, Squid Games, whatever. Well, naturally, since this particular story was written by the people of Israel, the God of Israel wins it all and ascends to the Most High throne. Otherwise, what kind of story would it be? If the main character loses, who's going to buy the book? And there sure ain't going to be any movie deals. Thank you all. Bye.